one of my friends, and we just like invented a conflict and
Right.
did the maths, rolled the dice, and so on.
Right. A little bit with like My
And
Robots. Yeah.
yeah, and yeah, exactly, in the same way. And we tried to have two characters and one, and so on. And then I made one more revision, and as I think I was. I reminded myself what I said to you, that I mean the conflict system, the conflict resolution system, is not that attached to the game. There is if you like do a kind of an if you do a kind of a relationship map of all the mechanics.
Right. I do those a lot. That's a big technique for me. So go on. Yes. And you suddenly discover that it's not connected. I see. Yes.
No, but it's connected, but it's only connected with one string, and it's through the establishments and with the stress. So it's a kind of an own universe in that sense. So you can do a lot of changes without, and you can basically scrap it and take something else, but without the important stuff of the game being affected that much. So where I'm at in the design process right now is basically I need to make. I can shortly. I can explain what I've done if that's interesting, but maybe I'm quite comfortable with what I've done.
Right. If you're comfortable with it and you are playtesting it already, then you don't need me. The fact that it needed to be changed or needed to be experimented with, that was my job.
That part of the game has its own, it has a direction now.
Yes.
It's evolving.
You know what it is for, and you will work on it, and that's fine.
Exactly, and I totally and I see that the game test now it's pretty complicated, but that's the way it always is for me.
Right, and as you go, you'll discover what to keep and what not to keep and everything.
Exactly. Right. So I kind of when I think we mentioned the kill your darlings concept. This is not. This is. I'm very pragmatic when it comes to this. I can change if it doesn't.
Right. So that's fine. Let's focus then instead on something that we should talk about. Yeah. And if you don't have something in mind, I have a couple of things that I have thought of.
I have things in mind, but you can take your first. They probably overlap.
Well, one of them is changing the topic a little bit.
Yeah.
Which is, what would make you happiest in terms of achieving a game design? What do you want to do with it?
As a product, you mean more?
Even that is jumping a little bit too far. Personally, I think design is its own disorder and publishing is the severe form. And maybe you're lucky.
It's too early. I'm not interested in the publishing.
Exactly.
Of it.
So that's what I'm saying. Let's focus strictly on design as it is.
Yeah.
And what that means, though, is that your instruments that you design, like your cards and things, should currently be restricted to completely practical. And don't worry about original art. Don't worry about its format or how thick the card is supposed to be or any of that crap, right? We are just talking about it as a pragmatic object. And so
and that's the way it is. So what I've done with the cards is that I actually changed the layout of the cards, so it gets, because before I had like one, they were like you flipped them when you were playing with them and when you created the character. Now I have everything on one sheet, but that's a minor change. But I really like it, and I also realized that my process when making a game, because if you see, the cards are content for me. They are not part of the system the structure of the card is part of the system and the rules, but the content of the cards are. So I use the creative process of making cards to understand the system and the rules.
Sure.
So I've also understood and made that part much simpler. So why? Because, for an example, the relations on the cards have 1, 2, 3.
Right.
And now I have specified that 1 is always a more it's much more of an what do you call it? More of a I'm looking for the harmonisk. What do you call it?
Harmonious.
Harmonious relation to the card, and the 2 is much more of a problematic relation to the card.
Uh-huh.
And
the
the
first
3
is kind of what it is. You are comfortable in it. This is what you can use as a baseline, and the others are things that are destabilizing it or creating interesting.
Yeah, the
tensions.
third one is more of a disruptive way of looking at the cards, a strange thing. But the number 2 is always being in conflict with the card.
I see.
This is my and that kind of helps you to make decisions as a group. Which card are we supposed to start with?
Right.
It's a card with a 1 with the relationship 1.
Sure.
Because that becomes much easier.
That makes sense.
That's like, for me, those kind of game design maneuvers is kind of like when making it's taking threads and putting them and
right. I completely understand, and I find that process much easier to understand and to do than something that just starts at one end and then just keeps going until each piece is finished. That doesn't work. So in this case, though, when you have it in your mind to think of your current work being finished or your current work being satisfied, I don't want to jump into the talk of production and product yet. That's not, but to know that you are looking in that direction.
Yeah, I am.
That's okay. That's actually important, because we have talked a little bit about this before, that the if you focus on design, you should not focus on teaching. Focus on design, not teaching. And then after you have the design in a very solid place, only then do you start thinking about teaching.
Yeah.
Right? Because otherwise you will be explaining when you are trying to teach, and you will be teaching when you try to explain, and as we talked about originally, that's a disaster.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
it's at least it's a disaster for someone else, because but it can be looked upon as a dialogue with yourself. You're teaching yourself.
Right. Well, that's true too.
That's not for someone else's eyes.
Right.
It's very very hard.
I completely agree. It's not it doesn't have to be phrased in a way that helps anybody else.
No.
And so that's a good point. Now with let's see. Here is something that I would like you to consider.
Yeah.
Since your techniques and your desires are to produce extremely colorful, fictional outcomes, is there a way for somebody to celebrate what they make with your rules? And a good example would be, well, there are lots of examples, I guess, but if I played Compact Stories and I picked a particular set to start, and my friends and I play a game together, it would be really nice to be able to share what we did. And if one of us were a talented artist, we were lucky, and one of us were an artist and drew cool pictures, that would be great. But aside from that, is there any way for anyone to enjoy what has been created? as a secondary audience.
Yeah. Okay. So you're basically some kind of recording of an actual play where you can see.
That's an obvious example that we already do, and that's
Yeah.
fine. But I was thinking of going even further so that play itself produced an enjoyable artifact.
Yeah.
Play itself actually involved physical instruments that could become themselves an enjoyable leftover, a product of play that you look at and that's the story or that's something about what you did that you can prize as an object. Actually have some kind of created thing that you can enjoy. And
So you're not only the actual play session recorder, but also some kind of artifact connected
right,
to that
yes,
session.
have,
Are you seeing this as a kind of a on my roadmap for the game? This could be
right.
one
Yes,
thing to look
exactly.
for.
It's something to exactly. It's a feature of your game that is extremely attractive. That if I make up this neat character in, for example, that 70s science fiction, that
Yeah.
fun science fiction set that we use, and if I make up a cool character, I would really like to have something about this experience to put on my wall,
Mm.
right? Or something about it to create and look at and say, wow, we made that's part of our artistic work here. You know,
Yeah.
we did this. And it is fun to have such things. We all know that. When somebody makes something like that from play, it's always a very
Mm.
treasured object, right? It's always. But it would be nice if there was a particular way to do it in compact stories that you could not only provide the means to do it, but you could also provide examples of when you do it. So
Yeah.
and now what it is, I'm not sure. I just wanted to get that into your brain and let it move around for a while.
I've written it up in on my Trello board here
Mm-hmm.
as a potential goal or something to have.
Right, right.
If
Just
because I totally get it.
yeah,
So and that would be something that is that would be good. I also would like to see what happens if someone else plays it.
right. Of course.
And there's also, I mean, I've done, the decks. They are supposed to be hackable. You are supposed to, and if you want to make your own deck, that should be something that I want people to do. So that's also, and that has
Right.
actually been done.
Right, right. No, I think that's an excellent point, and it reminds me a lot again of some of these older games like Everway, where you actually have a deck of vision cards
Yeah.
that you use to construct things with. That is very informal in lots of ways, but it works very well because of that. So, anyways, those are some of my thoughts that we can celebrate the unique properties of this game. There are
Yeah.
plenty of games where you sit around and talk your way through a bunch of cards. This should be a little bit better than that. This should be where you feel happy or excited that you made this story and that you faced certain constraints.